I'm Bill Oughton of Oughton Claims Management.
I'm Chantel Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster. Hey, Chantel, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm a little worried about California today.
Yeah, I am too. I feel for those people. It is amazing.
Yeah, I saw drone footage this morning of more than a neighborhood. It was a community. It was a town, and just acres and acres of neighborhoods just burned to the ground.
You
And
know, yeah,
horrible.
it is amazing because I cannot fathom the amount of loss. I remember one time I was flying to, I guess it was Seattle or something like that, and I could see up in the mountains because I had a window seat, all of these little bitty fires.
Hmm.
And I guess, you have these sorts of things, but I can't imagine because I looked on the New York Times map and there are four, I think, fires going on in the Los Angeles metro area right now. We just happened to hear about the Palisades because that's the biggest one, which
Right.
really, really surprised me that there's that many in such a congested area.
Yeah. Yeah, and the financial scope also. I mean, if I think I heard 9,000 or 10,000 homes. Let's say there's at the end of this that there's $10,000 million houses that have burned.
It's funny that you mentioned that.
That's $10 billion.
It is funny that you mentioned that because the Insurance Journal just released a notice this morning that said insured losses from Los Angeles wildfires rising 8 billion to 20 billion dollars. That's
Yeah.
a billion. And damage assessments from a handful of destructive Los Angeles area blazes are sure to become clearer. And it's going to be $1 billion plus loss. And it says, is the fire is only 3 days old. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, the math checks out, I guess.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be in the billions. And then when you start talking about commercial properties, if this starts hitting major industrial sites or things like that, I mean, it's just going to be, it already is catastrophic. The question is how much worse can it get? So,
Yeah. So I thought it would be a good idea for us to discuss some of the things that are going around in the insurance stratosphere, such as on Reddit and on Facebook. I am seeing a lot of adjusters ask, is this thing going to be covered? And specifically in regards to, because I think it's become kind of famous, this bulldozing footage have you heard about this?
I have briefly. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what happened?
Tell us all about it. So there are, of course, just like in any kind of other wildfire situations, a mandatory evacuation. And these people are leaving, and they're leaving in their cars, of course, with all of their possessions. But for whatever reason, there is an accident, there are other road closures. These people can't get out. And so you have gridlock on these streets. With these gridlocks and these cars not being able to be moved, the police and the fire departments are coming down these roads saying, hey, you need to get out to the people, get out, grab your stuff, leave the car, go over here, we'll take you somewhere safe. And all of these roads are being blocked by these abandoned vehicles. Well, unfortunately, these abandoned vehicles are, of course, blocking the roads so that our fire departments cannot get to where the fires are to put them out. So the fire departments are taking bulldozers and moving the cars, which of course damages them. And the question that is being posed on Reddit, Facebook, whatever, is this going to be covered? And Bill Wilson points out, and of course, I didn't think about it, But he is absolutely correct. Bill Wilson points out that it is not going to be covered in your standardized personal auto policy. And as we always say, look at your policy to make sure. But I thought I would read the exclusion real quick to the personalized auto policy that we're talking about that
And
Bill.
before you do, for just so people know who Bill Wilson is, if they don't already, he's the author of a book called When Words Collide, and if you're in the insurance claims business, well, I think anybody in insurance should read it because it's a very good book on how to really understand what you're reading in these policies.
Absolutely. And I would say if you don't follow Bill Wilson on LinkedIn, do so right now. In fact, put us on pause. I never say that, but put us on pause. Go find him and hit that follow button, and then come back and then hit the follow and like and subscribe button on LinkedIn or on Spotify and you.
YouTube.
Yeah, so you can be sure to get all of our little nuggets of wisdom and what have you. But going back to, and again, your policy may differ, but I'm just going off of the standardized policy, which is what Bill was going off of the personalized auto policy. It says exclusions. We will not pay for, and then number six, a total loss to your covered auto, which is in quotes, or any non-owned auto, also in quotes, which means that it's defined, due to destruction or confiscation by governmental or civil authorities. And so if the fire department is bulldozing a street and your car is damaged because it has been abandoned, even though they told you to do it, that car damage would not be covered. I bring this up because there are going to be a plethora of claims being filed, and you as adjusters need to, of course, send out that reservation of rights letter or whatever that you want to call it, and then send out the declination letter after you have done your investigation, because you do need to do an investigation, make sure that it wasn't just someone T-boning it or whatever. But
Well, it's interesting that I mean you can words mean things, right? So it says total loss. So if you had a partial loss by that bulldozer, would that be covered?
I still think you would have some issues. Because it is a governmental. Well, here's the deal: your car may be engulfed in flames. Maybe there's a partial loss there. I have no
Hmm.
idea.
Well, I
Maybe.
mean, if the bulldozer pushed the car and damaged it, but did not total, it's not a total loss because what you read said if your
Yes.
car is suffers a total loss, I think is what it said.
From the videos that we have seen, these
I
cars,
know they look like they're pretty
they,
damaged,
they do look like,
but
but
that
no,
begs
you're
the
absolutely right.
question. That
No,
begs
you're
the question, and I would say that a vehicle's declarative total loss after if the
absolutely
damages exceed a certain percentage, but
right.
um, is that technically a total loss? Is it the insurance carrier's prerogative to just say we draw the line at 70% of damages, and if it's over that, it's a total loss? Well, who's to say it's not 80% or 90% of damages? Maybe there's 10% of the car that didn't need to be repaired. That's not a total loss, is it? Anyway, words mean things. That can
Words
be
do mean things. And I think
fodder for the plaintiff's bar, I suppose.
it can be. And thank you for bringing it up. It is very true because you did bring up a very good point that, we're talking about a quote unquote total loss, even though the word total loss is not in the
It's not defined.
it's not defined. And so what happens when something isn't defined? I'm looking at the policy right now. You got to take the normal quote unquote meaning of the word. So I don't think in that particular instance, I would look up the word total loss in Webster's dictionary like I normally would, because I think I would fall back on what the standardized meaning is of the word, quote, total loss, or words, total loss, end of quote. And
Well, I've heard the reason I bring it up is I've heard different carriers use different standards to
oh yeah,
declare a total loss.
Yeah.
I've heard 50%, I've heard 70, I've heard 90, not 90, but I know I've heard 80.
Mm.
And it, you know, begs the question, where does that line get drawn and by who? And I think not only an issue, this issue, but across all issues relating to property claims, claims for damage that people are making under their own insurance policies in this fire. I think insurance carriers have to be very, very cognizant of the fact that they are on display now for the world to see. And this is going to really set the tone for how people view insurance. Let's face it, it's been a rough few months for in the insurance world these days. And the reputation that we have as insurance, my clients have as carriers is severely at risk. And there's not a lot of people that want to come into this business because it's like the big bad insurance company. And that's tough. It puts the insurance companies in a tough spot when you're faced with billions of dollars in losses. And
Absolutely.
this could destroy some insurance companies.
Oh, absolutely. Uh, I also want to point out there is an exception to the exclusion. And
Hmm.
again, this might upset a lot of insureds. The exception to the exclusion, which means there is coverage for a loss payee, because the exception to the exclusion says this exclusion, meaning that total loss from actions completed by governmental authorities, does not apply to the interest of the loss payee in your covered auto. So if you
So
have
your loan gets paid off, but
your
you don't have any equity left.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have absolutely no money. So thankfully, I mean, if you have a loan, it gets paid off.
Yeah.
Now, it would not be good for my husband and me. We don't have any loans on our cars.
Yeah.
So we would have to buy a brand new car with no money from our insurance company in that particular instance. And I hear what you're saying
Mhm.
about the total loss aspect. It does differ from carrier to carrier. I've heard 75%. Usually it's 70, 75%.
Yeah, and there's somebody at the insurance company, pardon my language, but there's some egghead at an insurance company who's deciding what percentage that is before you call it a total loss. And, it normally, I mean, it complicates the person's life who has this total loss because now they've got to, if they repair it, then they get a salvage title and it's a whole mess to deal with there. But in this situation, it's very important when it's called a total loss or not. And it'd be interesting to see how that's handled. And again, I would caution insurance companies to try and take the high road here because there's
Yeah.
going to be a big, I don't want to say that. I was going to say something. I
There's going to
would,
be a lot of attention
there's going to be a lot of attention on you. Yes.
on you and everything that you do. So anything that you can do to help pay this, which is what we are supposed to do in the first place. I mean, that is
Right.
the whole purpose of the insurance company.
Right.
I think we've forgotten it, is that we are supposed to pay covered claims.
And it's so hard because like I said, this is a situation where it's going to be one survival when it comes to the insurance landscape and the companies involved in these losses. It's going to be survival of the fittest,
Mhm.
and it could mean the closure of insurance companies, which to the detriment of all the people who have claims. Also,
Well, let's talk about that real quick. Or maybe not real quick because I mean, it's you and me.
nothing's real quick.
Anyway, but when we experienced, I think it was what, 2023, when we experienced all of the hurricanes that hit Florida and all of what, 11 carriers went into bankruptcy. And I think there were 8 in Louisiana that did that. And we did have some mass exodus out of California. And you and I were talking before we, got on air, so to speak, that State Farm had canceled some policies. Now, I don't think it's because of this. I think it happened before, right?
Well, that's the news story I've read that 30,000 policies were canceled in 2024 by State Farm. And people are saying, well, they must have known something and got out of the market so that they didn't have to pay these types of claims. Maybe, maybe not. State Farm is huge. They may normally in a year cancel 30,000, and this just happens to be another normal year where they cancel or non-renew policies. I don't know if this is an unusual thing for them to do in that state. It wouldn't surprise me if the number was larger than normal because they have some data, because these companies are all working off of big data. They may have some information that would suggest that the risk of this kind of thing happening in California was much higher this year than any other prior year. And all the algorithms told them to start, moving policies out of that state for that reason. Either way, I don't see it as a nefarious thing. I see it as, if they're normally canceling or non-renewing policies at that rate per year, then that's just what they do. And there's no correlation. If they did it because they saw something down the road that could potentially happen, you can't blame them either. I mean, if all the people who lost homes today knew this was going to happen 6 months ago, chances are they would have left too.
Mm, absolutely. And I don't necessarily know if it is because they knew or they didn't know or what have you, because like I said, I read something and I didn't look it up before we started, but I seem to recall something such as Progressive pulling out quite a bit, farmers pulling out of California quite a bit,
Hmm.
Geico, I believe, and State Farm. So a lot of them did, and then this was 2023. So a lot of them have been pulling out or reducing. And as I teach the students in my class, we start talking about the hardening of the market. And of course, right now we are in a hard market, which means
Hmm.
that there is less capacity, meaning there's less insurance companies writing less policies. It's
Yep.
more expensive.
Yep.
And it is because we have had one of the longest soft markets that in my insurance book that I teach from, it says that we've had a soft market for about 20 years. And that's one of the longest that we have ever had. It kind of took a little brief uptick to a hard market up in, 2008 or something like that, but not really. Every article
Well, the
reading.
reasons the reasons carriers leave states are multiple. I mean, in Florida and the Gulf Coast there, it's a combination of things. They're hampered by rates. They're they have a huge risk of storm damage. And also in Florida, you've got this huge litigious environment where the public adjusters are and attorneys are working together to file 1,000 suits a day against insurance companies. So it's ugly there for insurance companies. Well, California, I'm not out there very much, but they're regulated by the state of California. And if the state is not allowing them to adjust their rates so that they can remain profitable, it's time to pack up and go.
Yes.
And that may play more of a role to their cancellations and non-renewals than any algorithms about potential wildfires.
You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
Well, one thing I wanted to talk about was the governmental action and
Oh, okay.
that
Go back.
exclusion you cited in the auto policy. Similar exclusion applies to the commercial policy.
Mhm.
And there's an exception to this exclusion as well that I want to read to you that's interesting. It's a governmental action is damage from governmental action is excluded. All right. Seizure or destruction of property by order of governmental authority, but we will pay for loss or damage caused by or resulting from acts of destruction ordered by governmental authority and taken at the time of a fire to prevent its spread. Now, that makes sense. So if the government has to demolish a bunch of buildings to stop the fire from spreading to other buildings and stuff, that's one thing. But I'm thinking about like if I were to rewrite that auto policy exclusion that you
Mm,
cited,
mm,
I don't think, I mean, I could include some exception like this where all right, if the bulldozer has to move the cars to prevent the spread of fire, we'll cover that because that's like important. Um, I would say though that if they had to do it to save human lives, that should probably be an exception also. And it doesn't sound like it is. I don't know if that's ever been contemplated, but that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I had mentioned this in Bill Wilson's post saying, this is actually fascinating because I did not think about it. Honestly, it did not occur to me because like every other adjuster I think that has ever walked the face of the earth and every insured that's ever walked the face of the earth, we would all think that that would be covered without reading the policy, which of course, again, goes to read the policy, all of it, every single page before you make those coverage opinions and tell the insured something, leading them down the garden rose path, which is how bad faith happens, by the way, guys. And Bill had said that they have been after ISO, the insurance service offices, who write these standardized policies to make it less punitive for quite some time, and that hasn't happened. So maybe this would be something that will now make the insurance service offices change. And that's not to say, by the way, that State Farm, who has their own written policy, a manuscript policy, or Geico or USAA or whomever who use their own manuscript policy, have not changed that wording to
So
to be more conducive to their insureds.
absolutely, I think a policy change should be done to make it a little less harsh. But in the big scheme of things,
Mhm.
it's a video with a bulldozer and maybe 5 cars, maybe 6. If that happened 3 or 4 times across the entire state of California, I'd be surprised. So
Mhm.
we're not talking about huge loss. There's bigger fish to fry in this whole scenario than that. Of course, it's sensational because it's a video of a bulldozer pushing cars down the road, and everybody
Right.
looks at that and says, "Oh my God, what if that happened to me?"
Me.
But that's in the big scheme of things, small potatoes. We're talking about billions of dollars in losses and those 5 cars that were damaged. And if you own one of those cars, my condolences. And I hope it's covered. If it's not, I'm very sorry for you. But big scheme of things, that's not the big hairy problem with this fire.
No, while we're talking about governmental shutdown and what have you, there have been in the past, I have read a couple of checklists that you're supposed to do in these fire claims, and people are saying if you have to leave, turn off your gas. And the reason you turn off your gas is so that if your house burns down, you don't have another explosion, which will help feed the fire. And turn off the gas at like its source and the water heater at the
At the
actual
gas main, if you can.
yeah, at the gas main if you can. But anyway, shut it off. Don't leave your water dripping or anything like that because the firefighters need that water pressure. They did say, which I thought was actually interesting, turn on all of your lights and open your blinds, and of course take down your window coverings in case the fire bursts your windows or break your windows so that it doesn't instantly feed something, but turn on all your lights so that the firefighters can see your house because of the smoke. The smoke is that thick, which I thought
Mhm.
was rather interesting. But
Yeah.
I have worked hurricane claims, and I don't know, you may have worked hurricane claims or winter
Oh,
storms
yeah.
or whatever when well, I guess it wouldn't be in the winter storm where the government has shut down power to help I guess, conserve energy or brownouts or what have you, and businesses have lost,
Yeah,
for
and in
food.
hurricane situations in Miami in particular, I remember in 2017, they shut the power off for a while. I want to say it was a week or two. And the reason was to prevent problems from loose wires that had been downed from the storm. The lives would be at risk otherwise. Um, da fires could happen from exposed wires and all that. So, but by doing that, they forced a lot of businesses to be unable to operate, both from a retail, operational standpoint, but also from a standpoint of maintaining the product they had in, freezers or refrigeration units, or I even had claims where there were products on the shelves that would be fine at room temperature. Not They didn't have to be refrigerated, but if the temperature got above 120 degrees or so, then this stuff started to go bad. And I don't know if you know Miami, it gets hot down there.
Let's get hot.
So these little stores and stuff became these little hot boxes, and all the product on the shelves were damaged by the extreme heat.
Hmm.
So those are situations where the government made this decision, and the governmental action exclusion would apply then to damages caused by that, man-made power outage.
It's interesting that you talk about that sort of thing because there are when you have power surges and what have you, it could be an exclusion in our commercial property policy where the power being cut off either away from the premises may be covered, even though the loss of utility services is excluded. So in that particular instance, it would be real important, again, for the adjuster to do that investigation, just like the bulldozing thing. How much damage was caused by the bulldozer, or would it be some of the total loss would be the smoke damage, which could be covered? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
So utility services may be excluded under that commercial property policy if, I think it says, if the failure originates away from the described premises. But it says power surges, which would usually be like your brownouts or something like that, is usually not covered. But you're absolutely right. It can create that problem, which then leads to a business interruption claim.
right. And that's a lot of the claims that I had were either stock losses or relating to business interruption.
Mhm.
And so the power outage for a business interruption claim, I forget the rule. I think that if there's a power outage, the damage to the supply has to be on the property or within a certain number of feet, 1,000 feet or something like that.
I don't
Um,
have the BI policy pulled up, but I do have
right.
the CP 1030,
1030.
1012.
Okay, I got the
That,
2000
which
power. Let's see what it says here.
because I have utility.
Failure of utility services. That's the one. That's an exclusion.
Mhm. And it says the power failure of power is not covered, but there's an exception to the exclusion, which we've talked about previously. Exception to the exclusion means there is coverage. So it says if the loss of power originates away from the described premises or originates at the described premises, but only if the failure involves equipment used to supply the utility services to the described premises. So I would think, what's that, like a generator?
It could be a transformer if you've got
Transformer?
one on your property.
It's true. You could have a transformer on your policy on your property. Yeah. So, but yeah, any of that would not be it. But if it originates away from your premises, um, so there you go.
Like the government shuts it off at the
Mhm.
power station 5 miles from your place.
Would
That's
that be
off.
governmental
That's
authority though?
Well, that would be governmental authority, but yeah. So, but if a tree hit a power line a mile away and the whole neighborhood lost power,
Right.
then that power interruption would not be covered. And I
No, it
think
would be
that
covered.
no, it wouldn't.
Yeah, it would.
If it
If the
took
tree happened like a block away, even a block away, if the tree fell in the woods and nobody was there to hear it, would there be coverage? And the answer is yes.
All right. So I'm reading utility services exclusion here. It says the
Right.
failure of power or other utility service supplied to the described premises, however caused, if the failure occurs away from the described premises.
Oh, I'm misreading this. Shoot. Oh, well,
Gotcha.
ignore everything that I have said previously. Even Blue agrees.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
now, if that
in
tree
fact,
fell
he's
on
coming
your
in here.
property, if it was on the insured premises, that's different. That would be covered.
I'm totally gonna like take all of this out. The failure, see, I'm reading, I guess, a more modern one. I have
2012, you said? Yeah,
have
this is
2012.
2000.
Okay. The failure of power, communication, water, or other utility service supplied to the described premises, however called, if the failure originates away from the described premises or originates at the described premises, but only if such failure involves equipment used to supply the utility service, blah, blah, blah. Failure of any blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I kind of want to start all over again because I told everybody wrong.
We can edit that out.
We'll just edit all of it out. Yeah, so there you go. No exception to the exclusion.
Well, there is an exception. The exception is if the failure of power or other utility service results in a covered cause of loss, we'll pay for the loss or damage caused by that covered cause of loss.
Right.
So if that tree a mile away falls
Yes.
and disrupts the power, that's and there's no coverage for the loss of power. But if that causes a fire, because fire's covered, they'll
Yes.
cover that.
Yes.
This exclusion, I'm going to go burn your brain a little further here.
Oh,
This exclusion does not apply to the business income coverage.
where do you see that?
I'm in the 2000 form, so
Oh, because it's not
it's
here.
under utility services. So the 2012 form, I think may have some other language about business income losses and power outages. I don't know.
This is an excellent example of why you need to know what edition date you're looking at
Oh
because,
yeah.
because mine has failure of any utility service includes lack of sufficient capacity and reduction in supply. That's the brownout. Uh,
Hmm.
Loss or damage by a surge of power is also excluded if the surge would not have occurred but for an event causing a power failure.
And to swing back to the fires in California, they're having a real problem with water supply.
Yes.
And fire's covered anyway.
Mhm.
You don't have to worry about lack of water being not covered because fire's already covered. But what a shame though. I mean, to not have the resources you need there to fight this thing, it just boggles my mind. I think it's probably a situation that's bigger than any government could could
Oh,
put,
yeah.
could stop. I think this
Mm.
is Mother Nature really sticking it to us. But
Okay, let's talk about that. So there was, what is it, an M. Night Shyamalan movie about how everybody started dropping dead, and
yeah, I
and
remember
come to find out it was like all the trees and the plants killing us, and humans could only live in like groups of five or something like that because the plants and everything just decided to start taking to killing us, I guess.
that
So
would be a bad day.
that would be a bad day. I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but
No, I don't think so. One
I'm,
thing that this has done is given me the perspective on the climate where I live
mm,
and to not complain about the cold weather or the snow at all. We don't have hurricanes here. We don't have the hailstorms or the tornadoes they have in the Midwest. We have some flooding here, but nothing like, nothing like they have out west or Midwest rather.
yeah,
We certainly don't
uh,
have wildfires like they do in California.
no,
So
I
I
am.
have put a kibosh on any complaints about snow or cold, even though it's been pretty cold here this week.
I am still going to complain about the cold. It is freaking cold here, and we had a blizzard. I think this is like my fourth blizzard ever, and it was about like 18 inches or something like that, and it's just I can't stand it. Anyway, although
Well,
although Blue loves it. Blue does.
yeah, I'll bet.
He does love it. Okay. So there we go. Chantel got policy wrong because she can't read.
That's
And
okay.
yeah, well, I'm trying to do it fast.
It's
I could,
tough when on the fly. That's
yeah.
well, that's a good thing to comment about is that what I tell adjusters is that if you're going to talk about coverage with a policyholder, don't do it while you're trying to do the scope of your claim. That's
Mhm.
the wrong time to have a coverage conversation. You need to be at your desk looking at all the facts and reading these forms, making sure you've got the right forms in place. And that can be frustrating for a policyholder because they want to know, is this covered or not? I need to know.
Yeah,
And part of the art of adjusting is to actually have the soft skills necessary to maintain a calm environment in that conversation and just say, hey, look, I understand, I empathize. This is a bad situation for you. I'm trying to do my best to make it as good as we can going forward. So if you'll allow me to do my job, everything's going to go as smooth as possible.
absolutely.
Um,
And we now have 6 listeners, by the way.
oh
Woohoo.
yeah, six.
Yeah,
All right.
we
We
have.
have more than stop that. We have more than six.
It's not as funny if you say like, oh yeah, we got 20 listeners. We have 6.
We
And
have six. Yes.
so we have 6 listeners, and so to our 6 listeners, it would be you should know that Bill and I just pretty much we talk on the fly. And
We
yeah,
do have an outline.
we do have an outline, not that we follow it.
Yeah. Well,
I
we
mean,
do. I've been checking things off here.
okay, I have to. The last thing I did want to talk about, and we did slightly talk about this with our business interruption, would also be similar, would be the additional living expense. And this was also a question that I saw on Reddit and or Facebook where it was coming up, an adjuster, or I don't think it was an adjuster, I think maybe it was an attorney was saying, oh, yeah, you could get additional living expense for the homeowner if the smoke was too bad and you had to be forced out of your home because the smoke was too bad and you couldn't breathe or for health reasons or something to that effect. And I was like, ooh, probably not. Because again, what we're looking at is that direct physical damage to the house. And if there's no direct physical damage to the dwelling, then I don't think the policy would respond to it. Now, it could change if the Department of Insurance says, hey, you just need to go ahead and offer this, for emergencies. I don't know. Sometimes they try to do that and the insurance companies don't like it, but that's something to think about.
So my thought on that is if it's just bad air outside that's causing you to you know have a reaction, then no, that's
Mm.
not gonna fly. But smoke is one of those things that can be actually destructive to property.
Yes.
Smoke has chemicals in it and acids and all kinds of stuff that etches itself into materials. And if that smoke gets into your house and stinks it up, then you do have damage there. I would say that if the smoke caused damage to your home, you're going to have ALE coverage. But if it's just the environment outside is kind of sketchy, but we had wildfires in Canada last year, I think, last
Mm,
year or a year before, and the whole area was wild here. It was just like fog. It was like nighttime. It was really bizarre. And these fires were hundreds of miles away. But the wind stream brought this blanket down, and if you went outside, it smelled like a campfire,
right.
basically. It didn't really permeate the house if you had the doors and windows closed. So in that scenario, you're not going to get ALE for that scenario if you got to like leave town because you can't go outside but if in these wildfires, chances are the smoke is pretty bad. It's probably getting into areas. It's probably causing coating things on the outside of your house that would like a deck. I could see a deck being stained by it. Um, so if you got damage, physical damage to your house, that's where you're going to get the ALE.
Okay, but again, I'm going to throw this out. The issue is though that the policy will say, and I'm trying to find my policy right now, that you what have to maintain it has to be damaged and you maintain your current standard of living and blah blah blah. If your kitchen cabinets are just covered with smoke, um, does that really?
Well, okay, so all right, the question is, do you have to leave your house? You're right. If it's a cosmetic issue, if it's all the
Mm,
exterior of the house, does that mean you can't live there anymore? Probably not. I
exactly.
would say that if that smoke permeates the interior and creates an environment inside the house with along with damage to the house itself, that's where you're going to get coverage for the ALE.
Right.
That's probably a very important clarification.
And I think that's kind of, I'm sorry, that's kind of what I was talking about is, let's see if I can find it. Okay, yeah, here it is. Additional living expense. If a loss covered under section 1 makes part of this residence premises where you reside not fit to live in, we cover any necessary increase in living expenses incurred by you and your residents. Okay, and again, remember, this is the increase. So you don't pay for everything as adjusters. You just pay for the increase. And yeah, so
Yeah, and that increase is important. That's one thing that pops up a lot in these ALE claims when it comes to groceries and things like that.
mhm.
People say, "Well, I have a kitchen, so now you've got to pay me to eat out every night, and here's all my receipts from the restaurants. Please pay them." Well, we don't owe that. We owe the difference between that and your normal grocery bill because it's the difference that's covered,
The
not
difference.
not the total, and it's got to be reasonable. If
Right.
you're out eating at fancy restaurants at, $100 a plate or $200 a plate, that's going to be an issue. Have you seen the guy that's posting these ridiculous meals that he's gotten in, I think it's New York City, and he's paying $200 or $300, and it's this little piece of something, and he's complaining about it, and he keeps posting them, and people keep getting wound up about it. It's hilarious to read.
I will say civil authority prohibits use. If a civil authority prohibits you from use of a residence premises as a result of direct damage to a neighboring premises by a peril insured against, we will cover the loss as provided in number 1, additional living expense, and 2. So let's say you have a neighborhood right next to you that is damaged and you're, I guess, in that area where you need to get out. They will cover you even though your house is not damaged.
So if you have to be like evacuated,
Yeah.
got it.
If civil
Okay.
authority prohibits
A
you
civil
from
authority. Okay.
use as a result of direct damage to a neighboring premises. If you're reading that strictly, that would be your neighbor's house. Not your neighboring neighborhood or whatever, but
Right. Not three houses down,
yeah,
not
not
two
three houses.
houses down, the one next to you.
Um, mm, but what did we just say earlier, like an hour ago? Like,
Words
be
mean things.
nice. Well, words mean things, and everybody's going to be paying attention to what you're doing.
That's right. And
Everybody's
there's going to
going
be
to
a
be paying
lot of
attention.
gray areas on coverage throughout this whole mess
Yeah.
because I know this because there's gray areas in every claim.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And it's how carriers handle those gray areas that's going to maybe make the news. So just keep that in mind, I
Yeah.
would say.
Okay. Anyway, there's me discussing all the stuff and sometimes getting it wrong. Isn't that fun?
One other story I'd like to bring up about the fires is I mentioned that somebody had posted a drone video of a neighborhood, and as long as they're flying within FAA guidelines, more power to them. But there's a story about somebody flying a drone and it crashed into one of the planes that is used to transport water and drop water on these fires, and that plane is out of commission and they
Mm,
only had two of them in the area, and that one happened to be borrowed from Canada. That plane is now out of commission. If you own a drone, keep it on the ground while they are fighting these fires.
mm.
you don't understand the damage you've done, by taking this plane out of service.
It's a liability claim right there. And
That's
that is going
that's
to cost what, hundreds of thousands of dollars? It could
and
be on
and
your
don't forget,
homeowner's insurance.
operation of a drone is not covered under your standard general liability policy. You have to have an aircraft policy. So if you're out
Ooh,
there flying a drone
what about homeowners?
and you crash it into something, or if you crash it into, now, what if that plane crashed and killed a bunch of people?
Oh,
Um, I mean, the scenarios are numerous, but it's so easy for people to be dumb these days
it
that
is.
it's a little frightening.
It is. I do think I've seen drone exclusions on your homeowners as well.
There's an aircraft. They don't need one. There's an aircraft exclusion. So
Are
um,
drones considered quote unquote aircrafts though? I
they
mean,
are.
I don't think I would have considered it. Because do you
Ask
need
the FAA. I'm
okay.
certified Part 107 pilot.
All
It
right.
is
Well,
absolutely an aircraft.
all righty then. There
Yep.
you go. You've heard it first. And Bill is 9 times out of 10 more correct than I am. So,
Well,
hey.
I don't know about that. We'll see. One thing I would like to hear from folks is all the things we talk about here. We're talking about it off the cuff. We're looking at policies and we're rambling on as if we know what we're talking about. If we get something wrong, let us know.
Totally call us out.
I would love to hear all the mistakes we made. So, and I would be glad to stand up and make a correction.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Me too. Yeah, absolutely. I am not embarrassed to say that I have been wrong.
in
Way.
fact, all the mistakes that I have made in saying something here, I want to correct it. So if you catch something that I said that's wrong, please let me know so that I can correct it, because I don't want to put false information out or incorrect information out anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I have we kind of covered everything? I mean, I feel like this is a really important topic and we really need to know about things.
Yeah, and get so we normally record these ahead of time. I think this episode we're probably gonna put out there a little earlier than normal just because it's current, and
Yeah.
I know everybody's thinking about
Bonus,
this right now. So
bonus material.
bonus material.
It's our
Yes.
very first bonus episode.
Yes. Yes. You know what else I had an idea for? And maybe listeners, all of our 6 listeners can give me feedback on whether to do this. I got for Christmas a box of dad jokes.
Oh my God, that would be, are we gonna have like the art of adjusting dad joke?
Dad jokes for the one per episode. What do you think?
I love that idea.
All right. Wait till you guys
I
see my
love that
Viking
idea.
helmet soon.
Why? Because you got the Vikings coming to.
My you
Oh,
called it Krampus?
yeah. I thought it was Krampus.
It's here in the office. It's a Viking helmet.
Very cool.
My daughter got it for me. I don't know why. She's just nuts. So
Eh,
I'm gonna have to wear that on some occasion here for the podcast.
I think probably we should. Well, we're almost.
We'll think on it.
Yeah, we'll think on it. But yeah, yes. Okay, so we've, I think, talked a lot about this. We're gonna have a bonus episode. Yay, us. And yeah, we'll catch you next time. The next episode, I think, would be coming out relatively soon. We'll just check it out and we'll go from there.
We have one scheduled to publish on January 30th.
Yes. And we have one coming up on the 16th.
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Actually, you're right. We have one publishing on the 16th and then the next one on the 30th.
Yay.
Righto. And this will be a bonus.
This is going to be a bonus episode.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Yes.
Okay. Well, we will see you at our normal time, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Thanks. You too.
Take care. Thanks for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.auton.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.